So, okay, well, it's a little after 3:30 here in Central Time, so 2:30 Mountain Time. And we're going to go ahead and get started with our, sadly, I guess, but also a great sigh of victory that, that we've got through the whole conference. It's kind of sad that we're at our last session, but it's also a good feeling to know that we got through a whole conference. It's very exciting, but the conference is not over yet. We still have one really amazing session left. This is our session J, and it's the times they are always a-changin', tips for thriving through transitions. That's an excellent title. And our presenters are Lynne Ireland and Audrey Kauders, and my name is April White. I'll be proctoring here and monitoring. If you have any questions at all during this time, please feel free to put them in the chat. We may have times throughout the presentation where we will ask people to unmute or use your reactions if you want to. And then towards the end, we'll have definitely a time where people can turn on their cameras and maybe we can have a discussion and, kind of wrap the conference up more of a virtual face-to-face. So, all right, if anybody has any questions or notices anything, please put it in the chat and I will answer it as soon as I can. Other than that, I will turn it over to Audrey and Lynne.
Thanks, April, so much for all your technical assistance. And thanks to Audrey and Micah especially for all the incredible work you did to put this whole conference together remotely. I think a lot of us have really enjoyed the variety of experiences we've had over the last couple of days. And this, unfortunately, is as close to happy hour as we're going to get. Sorry, we can't offer you a beverage, but hopefully some of the commentary and some of the engagement that we are able to precipitate will give you just a little bit of happy as we get to the end of this good meeting. I should also say that we really want this to be informal and flexible. While we have a little bit of information we want to present, Audrey and I both really are interested in getting commentary and feedback from you. So we would appreciate it if you would like to unmute yourself and/or to join with video. We know that that might have a little bit of implication for broadband, but we think that can work too. So it would be fun for Audrey and me to see your smiling faces as we move forward with our tips through transitions. Audrey, you want to say hello?
Hello.
Okay.
I might also add that Lynne and I, we have figured out our represent a total of coming up on 80, 90 years between the two of us in our museum careers. So we really do hope that you will ask us and use us and share your feelings or your issues or whatever as they pertain to transitions.
But
not to say that we'll know the answers, but we can certainly talk a line.
But first, just to change it up, oops, and now my slide isn't going. We're going to start with an energizer. And this is a little 2-minute exercise that's going to help your body move and your brain move. And yes, we're going to sing. So I'm going to go through this really quickly. It's a little thing that involves a slap, a clap, finger snap, and wiggly fingers. And it goes like this. I'm alive, awake, alert, enthusiastic. I'm alive, awake, alert, enthusiastic. I'm alive, awake, alert. I'm alert, awake, alive. I'm alive, awake, alert, enthusiastic. Okay. Everybody all together, because we know you're alive and we hope you're awake, even though we can't see you video wise. But let's work on the alert and enthusiastic part, okay? So here we go, drum roll. I'm alive, awake, alert, enthusiastic. I'm alive, awake, alert, enthusiastic. I'm alive, awake, alert. I'm alert, awake, alive. I'm alive, awake, alert, enthusiastic. Yay! And if we were all together, we would do that repeatedly, and we do it faster and faster and faster. And you'd be amazed how difficult it is to keep your hands and your mouth going at the same time. But anyway, thanks for indulging me, and hope that makes you feel energized and ready to talk about what really often isn't a lot of fun, which is change. So sometimes the changes that we're looking at can be personal, sometimes they're organizational, sometimes they're both. And then what the heck do we do in circumstances like now when we're dealing with systemic changes where the economic, environmental, health, and social systems are all in flux? Well, we're going to talk about a variety of things, but first we'd like to take a quick poll and have you all let us know which of these kinds of changes you've experienced, and that may help guide our discussion later. So among the potential changes are a new job. And I don't know if you want to do a thumbs up or a reaction or a chat if that's applied to you. Or a new role at your current museum. New boss. Becoming a supervisor. Budget cuts. Layoffs. Staff departures, including resignations, retirements, and yes, unfortunately, even deaths. And are there other kinds of changes that you have in mind that you'd like to talk about? Feel free to unmute yourself and let us know, or enter something in.
The most recent change for us is one that you have already experienced, the two of you, and that is retirement. It's a huge change, and you spend a lot of time talking about it before it happens.
Yeah, great. Well, April was trying to do a little quick calculation of people's responses to these types of change. April, were there a couple that were most prevalent?
Probably a new role and new boss. Those were pretty prevalent ones.
Okay.
Staff departures got a big response.
Okay.
But pretty much just more than half of everybody at least reacted to at least one.
Great. Okay. Well, before we start to tackle those new role, new boss, and staff departure questions, we're going to do just a real quick sort of change 101. And we're going to talk about some ways to try to deal with change. A great quotation from the Zen nun Pema Chodron: when we resist change, it's called suffering. But acknowledging change and actually accepting it are oftentimes different things and very challenging. But one of the ways that you can start to do that is by simply acknowledge that things are changing. Then realize that even good change can cause stress. So maybe a good suggestion is to keep up with your regular schedule, or some schedule at least, as much as possible. And of course, try to eat healthy foods. And change does not necessarily equal a license to eat Cheetos, but some of us have done that more than once. Exercising, seeking support, writing down the positives that are associated with the change, getting proactive, not reactive, venting, but only to a point, and backing away from social media, all may be ways that we can try to acknowledge and accept change and eliminate some of that suffering. Accepting change can also make you feel vulnerable, but vulnerability is the very crux of it. It's the birthplace of innovation and creativity and change. So, and talk about vulnerable, I mean, this is the first time you all have heard me sing with my terrible singing voice. So, you know, I was making myself vulnerable by asking you to do a goofy thing with me. Nobody has all the answers to questions. And so asking those questions can make you feel vulnerable, but you got to be brave. And by being awkward and brave and kind, as Brene Brown says, you can help build trust. And that happens in those little moments when you're willing to say, you know, I just don't know which way you prefer this, or would you like to go to lunch, or can I take a risk and talk to you about something? Of course, we've heard about planning, and Montalee and Steve have both talked very specifically about how plans can help us out. But I think at this point, instead of going through these particular ways to plan for change and some resources and stuff, I think this is the time that we'd like to stop now and talk with you about the areas of change that you've experienced, or encourage questions about what you might like to hear from us. So I think our list was new role in a museum. So who wants to start talking about that? Audrey, do you want to take it away at this point?
Surely. Certainly talking about being vulnerable. When you go into a new role in a museum, presumably you are in that role for some good reasons. But nonetheless, you feel that you need to prove yourself. Maybe I'm just speaking personally, but I always felt I kind of needed to prove myself, prove my worth. And so that can be extremely stressful. And that when I actually kind of got into the position in the museum or the new role, then you were just so focused on just dealing with a whole lot of maybe new things, or seeing the same things from a very different perspective in your new role, that itself was challenging. And but I actually found doing that was better than to wait and sort of just dip your toe in a little bit at a time. The actual doing of it is often one of the best learning experiences. I guess in my own life, I have found that I actually learned a lot more from mistakes, either my own, which are legion, or certainly by observing them in others, than I did when everything went perfectly. So there's a lot to be said for learning and improving by what didn't work.
Yeah, I think that's true. In my decades with what used to be Nebraska State Historical Society and now is History Nebraska, I worked in 6 different positions. And it was really exciting in a way to have the opportunity to take on new responsibilities. But there also was, I think, a fair degree of anxiety about just proving that the confidence that had been placed in me was actually worth it, and in trying to learn more. What does anybody else have to say about new roles? Any insights? Any good resources? Crickets. Okay.
Oh, I'll say something, Lynn. This is Kelly. I'm sure, as you probably know, I mean, since we worked together for many years, I've had different, changing roles over the years, not necessarily new job titles per se, but I've, had duties added, but then I haven't necessarily had duties taken away. And so for me, a lot of times it's just been, okay, now I'm going to be, doing this and trying to figure out what is most important and, what can I, let set aside for a while, and, what do I need to do immediately? What are deadlines like for everything? So.
Yeah, and I think here again, this is where a question of vulnerability comes into play. It's really challenging, especially if you've become the supervisor of some people, to say, I've never supervised people before, or I've never supervised this many people before, or to say, there are all sorts of aspects of your particular jobs that I don't understand. So I'm going to need you to be my partner in this whole endeavor and help me know what I need to know about your reality. And I think that sometimes is a challenge for people because they feel that kind of undermines their own authority. If you say, I don't know, or I need your help, or you need to be my partner. But I think increasingly we're moving to a much more collegial style of work in the museum world and in a lot of organizations. So
I might also add that I think there's this very special place for the interim position, because that in itself has its own inherent challenges. When you're in an interim position, is that really an audition for the permanent position, or is it just really short term? But regardless, within the interim position, I think you find that you focus on just the non-long-term things, because you may not be there to implement that long-term whatever. And so every decision you make has to be weighed against that. And so I would encourage those of you who are working with people who are in an interim position to be very kind to them. And likewise for those who are in interim position to realize that that is also a very special subset of change.
This is Kirsten, and I was going to say one of my things that I've really had to think about with COVID is giving grace to yourself, giving grace to others, that we're all just simply doing the best that we can. And I have a little reminder on my computer, and I just took a label maker and I made a little label that says 6 + 3 = 5 + 4. And really what it means is I may add to 9 with 6 + 3. You may add to 9 with 5 + 4, but we may do it a little bit different, but as long as we know what our common goal is, it's okay. And so I think sometimes that's just a reminder that we may be going in a different path or a different route, but as long as we have a common goal, it's going to be all right.
Good, very good point.
what about the new boss change? What have people experienced there? Audrey, you've had a few new bosses in your tenure.
I have. Yes, I'm an optimistic person, so I always assume the best until reality sets in, maybe in some cases. In some cases, it was far exceeded the optimism. It was much more. Other cases, it was about what I expected. And I luckily was never having to experience it being less than what I had expected. Because of course, museum people are so special.
Well, I worked for 5 different directors in the course of my tenure, and I think the 2 F's would sum up my advice, which is friendliness and flexibility. That if you can actually communicate to this new boss that you recognize that they're coming into a new situation, that they may not be familiar with the lay of the land, that they may not have the relationships or connections or history that you have, and to say, hey, here's some people that I could introduce you to if that would be of interest, or how shall we work together to set you up to get you more familiar with this new activity that you're engaged in. Or even just to say, did you bring your lunch today, or would you want to go to lunch? I think we oftentimes, particularly if we're looking at directors or CEOs, think that those people are completely self-contained, that nobody needs to offer simply the friendly gesture of saying, hey, I'm going next door to get a cup of coffee. Can I get one for you? I think a lot of times people are concerned that that would be perceived as sucking up, that, oh, you're just trying to get on the good side of the new boss by doing this stuff. But I think that basic friendliness is where you start building relationships. And then in terms of the flexibility part, I think, especially if you've been in an organization for a long time and somebody new comes in, it's really easy to get into well, that's not how we do it here, or we've always done it that way here, or, well, we tried that once and it didn't work. Whenever that new person tries to offer suggestions of change, and to be flexible, to be able to take a step back and to say, maybe we could do things differently, or maybe I ought to reconsider this. I think that along the flexibility along with the friendliness can help build a positive relationship with a new boss. And lastly, I would say too, if you've ever experienced what I call the Messiah complex, that's something that I hope can be avoided. And by that, I don't mean that you think you're the Messiah, but sometimes when staff have been in a really difficult situation and a new leader comes into that organization, people say, oh, well, when so-and-so comes, we'll be able to do this. And when so-and-so is here, we'll be able to do that. And this will be so much better. And people project onto that new leader all of their hopes. But of course, that new leader isn't the Messiah. She or he is just a person bringing a lot of skills, but also trying to do a job. So. New boss.
Becky, I see in the chat that you said that you have gone through quite a few city managers, and since your museum is a part of city government, that's a big deal. How did you? How have you survived, Becky?
Well, we did look for a Messiah every time. We get another one in the next month. Our hopes are high. We've been having that discussion during this. I'm sure we will be wrong because we've been wrong 11 times. We discovered that sometimes it's not our city manager, it's the fact that they work for someone also. So we had one just recently that we dearly loved, and yet we didn't get the choice and he was gone. He only lasted a year and a half. He had great plans, but that didn't happen. So, here's my theory. I've survived 11 of them. I will survive number 12. Because I'm still here. But that doesn't mean we're not hopeful, because we're always hopeful, because it could get really better. It could get really worse, but we're trying not to think of that. So, because we've had some very, very bad ones, but we've also had some phenomenal ones. We wouldn't have our current museum if it was not for the city manager that was here at that time, that was willing to jump on a bandwagon and take a gift from a donor. So, we're hopeful. But I do love the Messiah thing. That will be something we use from here on out.
How have you presented the museum to each new boss you've had? I mean, have you been proactive? Have you been reactive or?
Well, because we also work as an event center for the city, we usually meet them before they ever become the city manager, because when they wine and dine them, they do it here. And of course, there's always groveling involved. We treat them like they were, the second coming when they do show up to visit the first time, and we cater to their every need, and we offer to do anything they want. And, like I said, some groveling, nice groveling, but I don't know. Other than that, we do try to be proactive. The last one we had that we liked that didn't stay very long, to top it off, was a genealogist. Come on, how could that not be good for us? Because that's such our main focus here. So, we try to find what they like, and we try to make sure we cater to those needs. We are decorating the offices for them for whatever they, theme they like, and using artifacts out of our stash. And we try to make ourselves available when they want to have meetings here or anything else. We've just, since Zooms are never going away, we've just reset up so that we can handle large Zoom meetings here, hoping that because we're a better setup than at the city, we'll get him that way. But we just do what we do.
Well, I do think that Lynne's comment about friendliness is very good, and just trying to establish a rapport through simple things. Not to assume because that person is feeling uncomfortable too, probably in a new situation. So I thought that was very insightful, Lynne. Thank you.
I think Sydney was going to chime in at some point.
If I can click the unmute button. Yeah, I was going to say, and I put it in the chat actually, that your comment about reaching out to the new boss, when I took this post, it was the first time I had been at the top position of an organization, and it was really isolating. So, if you really want your new boss to be a team player, it's important to let them be on the team and invite them in. It's not groveling. It's recognizing that, well, leadership is one role on the team.
Yeah,
So
well, there's a reason they say it's lonely at the top, right?
I think another thing too to remember is that your boss may have different directives than what you know as well. So you don't know what they were hired for, what their specialty might be, what directions your board of directors or your city may want to go. So I think sometimes we make judgments on that boss when they're coming in because they're not doing it the way they've always done. But just know you don't know behind closed doors what are their marching orders. And so showing that support, I think, is really important. But just remember, there's 3 sides to every story, and you might only know one of them.
Good points.
Any other new boss tale comments? Share? Well, let's then maybe move on to staff transitions. What happens when there are transitions because of budget cuts or resignations or retirements, or in the case of us at History Nebraska, we had 3 treasure chests of Nebraska history knowledge who passed away unexpectedly within a 1.5 years. And so then suddenly all of those questions that we always went to Carter or Potter or Beaker to get the answer to, we had to start from scratch digging out for ourselves. Audrey, do you have any preliminary thoughts?
I think I too, when I was at Jocelyn, there was a death of someone on the staff. In my mind, a youngish person, and it just goes to show you how valuable every single position is within the museum. This was someone who was really in the building department. But in a museum, of course, maintaining the quality controls and environment and temperature is exceedingly important. And so it's a personal loss as well as an institutional loss. And as Lynn said, that knowledge. So, and you just have to acknowledge it and figure out how to go on. I am aware of a museum where staff have been, several museums that I have been at where staff have left, maybe not under the best of circumstances, not at their own choosing, let me put it that way. And then there you've got the survivor issue with those who are still there. Why not me? Or I feel guilty, and they're all very, very hard decisions. Anything to do personnel is extremely, extremely challenging because it is personal. Probably most of us were trained, ironically, in the humanities, so we tend to be humane people. At least I would like to think so. So that's why I think it's very, very hard. And even when people are not trained in the humanities, they're probably humane people, but they've had to, in their particular field, kind of get a tough skin. And sometimes that's not to say that they're not equally affected. It's just that maybe they don't manifest it quite as much as those of us who've maybe been more in the humanities areas of training.
I think maybe we have a couple of hands up from April. Do you want to?
Yeah, it looks like a couple of people do have their hands, their digital hands up. I didn't get a chance to see who had their hand up first, so I apologize. But Monta, it looks like you have your hand up.
I do. And I got the best advice, speaking of death, I got the best advice from a boss I absolutely hated. But I was running a historic house museum, and we all said goodbye to each other Friday. And then Monday, we realized we had to say goodbye to one of our colleagues who got killed in a car crash over the weekend. It was devastating. It was shocking. It was like, oh, what do we do now? And I was the director. And, but I had a boss, and she said, word like that travels fast. And she called me up. She said, get a counselor. It's like, really? And she goes, yes, you will need a counselor. So she got me a counselor who showed up at the museum almost the next day. There was about 10 of us. And what that counselor said was, he turned to me. In fact, he pulled me aside and said, now, when somebody hits the wall, you let them go. You let them go home. I said, well, this is the municipality. This is the city. We have strong rules about walking off the job. He goes, no, I am hired by the city, and they are letting me tell you this. So he said that was the best advice. And I had lots of people over the next month hit the wall, and it was obvious when they did. And I just go up to them and I said, now you can go home and we'll see you tomorrow. And then they recovered quickly. And it was the best advice to get a counselor and to recognize when they couldn't handle it.
Very interesting.
And
Absolutely, thank you.
And
yes, and Brock, looks like Brock also has his hand up. Go ahead, Brock.
So, hey, I think the other dynamic too for us here, we have a limited amount of staff members that we have. We utilize the UNK for many students, student interns for a variety of different projects, but our volunteers, when they come and go, whether it be death related or move, they have an astronomical impact on our day-to-day operations. So, for example, we have a great volunteer archivist in the back, and her name's Elaine Battenhorst. And so when she leaves for about 3 months out of the year, I mean, I'm constantly emailing her, texting her, and it's just her presence not being here it's just crazy how much our volunteers are relied on here, and they're irreplaceable. So I think the other dynamic here would be just the fact that we have volunteers that are almost like staff members, but they have their own things that they bring to the table. And when they're gone, the things that have to be reshifted or rechanged and according to the new volunteers that we get.
I would say that since all museums are vitally dependent on volunteers, in my own mind, I kind of think of volunteers as being staff, unpaid staff in a way. So good point.
I think
I don't see anyone else with their hands up, so.
Okay, well, I think the point that we're hearing here too is a reiteration of what a number of our speakers throughout the conference have talked about, planning and communication. Obviously, if someone gets suddenly killed or quite precipitously quits the museum, you don't have necessarily a whole lot of opportunity to do planning ahead of time, but there is some opportunity to think in more general terms about those things. So we might just go back to our slides for a minute to talk about some suggestions for planning for change. In terms of personal change, figuring out where you want to be and what you want to do in 5 years sounds like kind of an academic exercise, but the first time I had a supervisor who asked me that, I was really stopped short, because what I wanted to do was have a job in 5 years. But it really helped me start to think about what future roles might look like for me and what future training I might want to pursue, and how I might want to make a better contribution to the field. In terms of organizational planning, I think we all need to, just like we need to ask ourselves, okay, do we have any sort of personal plan? What about the organizational plan? And what do you have in place? Do you have an organizational operating system manual? You know, what's your OS for your museum? Who knows how it is that we do things? And if how it is that we do things is information that resides only in a bunch of people's heads, change is going to come to your organization like a bomb going off, because when that person suddenly isn't there for whatever reason, that information that was in their heads about how to make something work is going to become vital, but is going to be really difficult to recreate. Likewise, we all need to have developed succession plans. And that includes thinking about how vacancies are posted, filled, and new staff are onboarded. And Audrey may have something to say about succession planning in just a minute. But the other sort of planning that, particularly after this year, I think we all are much more aware of. That doesn't mean we've necessarily gotten the documents figured out or the processes figured out, but disaster response and business continuity. How do you keep going when the change is catastrophic? When there's a flood, when there's a pandemic, when there's a huge economic downturn. So Audrey, do you want to say something about succession planning?
Yes, I can do that, but just generally planning. I have found that plans are more successful if it is not an entire book. Plans do not have to be page after page after page. It reminds me of the legal profession. I've always thought it's so ironic that they're called briefs, and the last thing they are brief. So, you know, you can do bullet points. And so even if you do nothing for your SOPs, your standard operating procedures, but just do nothing but sort of a few bullet points of the procedure or who signs off on this or whatever it may be, that is at least something that is written. And then in the next pandemic, then you can take the time to flesh those out more. I'm only joking when I say the next pandemic. But again, do not feel that you never get to, because it is a problem. You know what's going on. You can't take the time. You don't feel, at least I never felt, I could take the time to do it, but yet we've heard today how many people said planning is so important. So how do you balance that with the crisis of the minute, the hour of the day? And so that is an issue. I will say that I did do a succession plan for the position at Mona, the director position at Mona. And again, it wound up being just one page. At the time, I tried to find some examples, because I do better if I'm not starting from scratch, if I at least have something to start with. I may change it totally, but at least it's a starting point for me. And I couldn't, so it was just faster eventually than just to go ahead and try and do it myself. And that was my point. It was really just one page, but at least it was something to sort of hand on. And the other thing is, I would also say there are some personal things in retirement, and we have several who are on this call who are in that, maybe on that, in that mode. I don't know if Mike Smith's still on the call, but certainly Lynn and myself. And so I just want to add a few things for the personal transition to retirement, or just transition to a different institution or a different job. I think Lynn ran into this. Email. I think we all use our work emails as the main email. Well, if you're no longer at that place, you maybe need to have a new email account. So it's always good to maybe have your own personal account at least established, so you're not trying to do all that at the same time. Wardrobe. My doing the weekly laundry is a lot easier, because when you're at work all the time, you of course are never going to wear the same outfit twice in the same week, never mind one day after another. So certainly all the clothes you may have. I don't know if this is just a female thing, but I think men might kind of think of that too. And then kind of to figure out how you're going to structure your day when you're, in my case, in retirement. Would be less so if you were leaving from one institution to go to another. And so sometimes maybe you need to kind of line up some projects to kind of make your transition from working to non-working, from a Friday to a Monday. So those are just a few little things to throw out to some of you who may be making that kind of a transition.
Anybody else have any comments they'd like to make about planning? We've heard quite a bit about it.
Sorry. It looks like we actually do have a question in the chat from Sydney at Joslyn Castle. Wants to know, what kinds of items show up as bullets in succession planning?
The sort of items that, well, I think Montalee has some comment on that. Was Montalee going to say something?
No, I wasn't.
Okay. I saw the, yellow frame around your name. So, oh my gosh.
Too. I didn't know what that was for.
Oh, I'm sure you hit a ring against your keyboard or something like that. Yeah, Sydney, I'm happy to sort of pass on the actual document that I came up with, which a document makes it sound like it's so much more than it really was, but it would certainly be how you would counsel, in my case, the board to conduct a search, what the options are. They need to plan for an interim situation, maybe. And so what would that be? They would have to find a search, they would have to form a search committee. If they're going to be an interim search situation, are they going to try and find someone else in the profession who maybe is available for a couple of months? That's actually how I started at Mona. Or are they going to maybe bring in a board member to take that position, that sort of thing. And then the search process, and where are the places that they might be able to advertise the position. Just a few very practical options for them to consider. that
And
help you?
I think in any well-run organization, the bylaws or other board policies should exist that help itemize how board members get selected and replaced and oriented and brought on. And likewise, that board, if it's the hiring entity for the director, that board ought to be developing something so that when in fact they're confronted with a director's announcement that he or she intends to retire or resign, isn't suddenly saying, oh my God, now what are we going to do? How do we even start? I see Steve.
Yes. I think succession planning at a private nonprofit is quite different from succession planning in a municipally or governmentally run organization. Quite frankly, succession planning so far in government places, I think pretty much sucks. They don't handle it well. Maybe you experienced a little bit of that too, but I tried to make the succession work with my retirement, gave them 6 months notice, and they didn't get anybody on until 2 months after I left, and they were unprepared for it. And not only that, but we went through all the interviews, and when we went into the second interviews, my boss told me, oh, by the way, we've decided we don't want to go with a Steve 2.0. We're going for something totally different. And all of the stuff that I had laid out and all didn't mean anything to them. So that can happen in government. And of course, we see that happening nationally as well with things kind of when there's somebody new in, new appointees, everything hits the fan. So I think what you're talking about with succession planning is great for private nonprofits. In government, you got to be really flexible.
Great point.
Good point, yeah.
Any other thoughts about the planning thing? If not, I'm sure you're going to be thrilled that we're going to go look at another slide, which is just some quick notions about organizational changes. If you are the new person who's coming in, or if you've changed your role within your organization, or if you're trying to accommodate the reality of staff members who were your colleagues no longer being around. These are some attributes that a woman who did a very large study of change in organizations, Victoria Grady, identified in a recent piece in the Harvard Business Review. And in the places that successfully managed change, she identified at least 3 principal issues. Number one, choice. When people feel like they have a role in shaping next steps, particularly when something negative or unexpected happens, it can help everyone move forward. Now, obviously, sometimes that isn't realistic. You can't invite every single member of the museum staff to participate in the selection process for the new director. But finding the places where you can give people choice and buy-in is important. Number 2, connecting to the purpose, galvanizing around that clear purpose or mission while major changes occur. And how can you instill purpose into everyday activities? Monta shared some great examples of historic house museums that were doing the mundane, but by so doing, were building community support and understanding of all that it takes to keep the museum operating. And 3, using something new to establish a bridge to where you are headed. And that could be new objects, new innovations, or technologies that can serve as bright spots. And I think we have many examples here in Nebraska of museums that have used technology to create new bright spots and new service for their communities. I don't know if anybody on the call wants to talk about what they've done there with technology. Or is it getting just too close to real happy hour? Well, I've got a list of resources to sort of sum up that some of you may find of interest, and some of these may be real familiar to you. Starting with more personal change kinds of resources, William Bridges' book, Managing Transitions, Making the Most of Change, is a real standard, but there's a new edition out. That book has been in publication for 25 years. So that gives you some testimony as to how effective people have found it. A little bit more on the spiritual end of things would be When Things Fall Apart, Heart Advice for Difficult Times by Pema Chodron. And this is a book that I go back to repeatedly, and that I have given dozens and dozens of copies to others. And it's thin, but it can be helpful in giving people some structure for realizing that actually the only thing that is constant is change. Brene Brown is a social worker who's done a lot of work in terms of helping people live better lives. And she has a great book called The Gifts of Imperfection that I think also relate to whoever it was who earlier talked about giving grace, you know, that extends even to ourselves. Then in terms of the professional resources, you've already heard about these, but I'm going to just bang the drum again for the American Association for State and Local Histories Standards and Excellence Program. And it should be Standards of Excellence Program. And also the American Alliance of Museums Museum Assessment Program provides a mechanism through which consultants can come work with your museums on specific aspects of your operations. And of course, Steve and Montalee both referred to, and Mike Smith referred to, the Mountain Plains Museums Association's retired or other sorts of resource folks that they can make available. And Audrey and I have both indicated here too, as you can see by our email, that if people are interested in communicating with either one of us about particular circumstances, we'd be more than happy to give you the benefit of our experience. Any other questions or comments? I promise I won't start singing again.
You were brave, much braver than I would ever be.
I just want to note a couple things in the chat here, just so they don't get overlooked. Anna Nolan and Alan Cobalt said, having the advice of Audrey when we were starting the Bone Creek Museum was invaluable, and we still remember it with great appreciation. And Brock also says, thanks everyone, great first ever conference. So this was Brock's very first conference ever, so he really enjoyed it. I look forward to meeting you all in person next year. So, and this is also my first NMA conference, so that's, I second Brock's emotion there for sure. Rachel Morgan says she's also a huge advocate for succession planning. So yeah, preparing for change, as Lynn and Audrey have both said here, can really, really be helpful, whatever form that takes. And I also just wanted to say, I really appreciate what Lynn and Audrey said about, having vulnerability and just kind of this reality around this idea to help overcome. I know I myself have had issues with like imposter syndrome in my positions. And I feel like a lot of us have that, where we feel, because we really care about the places that we're working for or the people we work with, that we feel like sometimes we want to be the absolute best we can, and we worry, is there somebody out there better than me? And But as long as we all keep working and collaborating, I feel like it's easier to overcome that, and embracing, you know, change with the friendliness and the flexibility that Lynn and Audrey had both discussed. So thank you both so much for everything. If anybody has any last questions or anything, I'm just going to open it up if anybody wants to just turn off their cameras, since we're coming up here almost to the next and last wrap-up session. If anybody just wants to, you know, chime in and discuss, feel free to unmute and turn your video on, and we will be here.
Thank you all for being such a gracious audience, and looking forward to seeing you all in person in Holdridge.
And as the program chair for this whole conference, I want to thank absolutely the participants, the presenters, the NMA board. This has been a huge relief that we got it this far. That is to the end. So thank you, thank you, thank you.
Thank you.
I was going to say, I think I can speak for all of NMA and everyone here. Audrey, thank you for all your work that you've done chairing this event, and for everybody who helped organize it, for sure. This was a big learning experience. It was very exciting, but we've all proven that we did it, we can do it. So that's very exciting.
Because we're flexible and adaptable and we can learn.
Absolutely.
And we collaborate.
So does somebody need to offer a benediction now, or?
No, I think that it's to April for introducing our closing remarks.
All right. Well, thank you again so much, Audrey and Lynn, for our final session. It was very fascinating. I think a lot of really amazing, relevant information that all of us, and no matter what our positions or what we've gone through the last year, we can all, you know, take something from what you've presented. So thank you so much for all of your wisdom and insights, and they're incredibly valuable. Thank you for that. So, all right. Well, we are just after 4:30 here, which kind of makes me sad. I feel like I should drag this out as a way to symbolically make the conference keep going, but I know everybody's probably to the point where they're ready to, you know, in a great way wrap everything up. So, all right, so it's 4:30 now Central Time and 3:30 Mountain Time. And so we will move on to our wrap up here for day 2, also a wrap up for the whole conference, on to Aaron Hauser, who was recently, by unanimous vote, elected the new president of the Nebraska Museums Association Board. So congratulations so much, Aaron, and I will hand it over to you. And I will make you host here. Hang on.
Well, I don't have anything to share screen-wise, so you don't have to worry. You don't have to worry about that. I just want to thank everybody for attending. I think that we had a great conference. I think when I was looking at the participants, I think the peak that I saw was 43, which I think is great for a virtual conference. And I think that some people, there were probably more than one person there, so we probably had even more than that 43. Also like to thank all the presenters yesterday, and especially those today. So Steve Friesen, Brock Anderson, Reagan Moore, Don and Susan Traub, Monsley Dakin, Lynne Ireland, and Audrey Kauders. Thank you so much. I was so impressed with the variety of things. It's going to take me a while to digest everything that I heard over the past 2 days. I love the variety, and I think I can pull something out of every single session that we had, which I think is a great example of a good conference. Thank you to all presenters and all the proctors who helped keep things going. Thank you especially to the program committee. I know this was a 2-year thing, but I think you guys did an amazing job. I think I have on my program committee Audrey, Micah, Crystal, and Becky Maddox. I think those who are the ones that I have down. So thank you again. You did a great job of getting this variety of people and programs for our Nebraska museums. I also want to send a really big thank you to Karen and April, our tech gurus, wizards, whatever accolade you want to call them. You guys did an amazing job of setting this up and handling the technical difficulties. Everything that I saw was just little minor glitches, but that's to be expected for the first time doing this. So I appreciate everything that you guys have done. A couple of quick reminders for everybody. The newsletters, April sends out the newsletters at least once a month. If you have anything that you want to get into the newsletter, let her know. I think her contact information is on the website. So if you have an event coming up or you have a program that you're going to do, let her know and she'll send it out to everybody. Another reminder for our monthly musings. Those are some great little mini sessions, if you will. Lots of good information for those, and everyone is welcome for that. If you want the contact information for those Zoom meetings, please again, let us know. Also that disaster grant that we have, that little mini grant that we've now expanded to COVID relief. So again, if you need like a new tablet or something, or a webcam or a dot cam or something like that, the grant information is on our website. So our website is the place to go to find out some of this information. I think within the week we're going to be having we're going to send out a evaluation or a survey about our conference, and we'd appreciate it if you send back a response. Tell us what you liked, tell us what we could do a little bit better, so that we can use that for next year's conference or some future things that we might be doing online. And also, is Micah still on? Maybe not. Well, just a reminder that next year's conference will be in person in Holdridge. So April 4th and 5th, 2022, it will be our Nebraska Museums Association conference. And if there's anything else, does anybody else have anything that they want to say before we go our separate ways, if you will? Well, if there's nothing else, oh, Lynn.
I was just going to say, if you enjoyed some of the conversation that you've had or some of the things you've learned in this process, be sure to Zoom in for our next monthly museum musings get together, which will be in May. I think May 21st. Is that right, Erin?
Yes. Yes.
We're also still looking for somebody to volunteer to help lead that discussion on summer programming.
So and Karen, the stuff will be on our YouTube channel within about 4 weeks, correct?
Correct. The recordings will be on our YouTube channel in 4 weeks. And then several of the presenters have shared their slides, and those I hope to get up yet this week, but we'll see.
Well, sometime within the next couple of weeks, you'll at least start getting stuff online.
Yes.
Okay, that's great. Again, thanks to everybody who attended. Thanks to our presenters. Thanks to everybody who contributed something. Thanks to the board and the area reps. Once again, if you have any questions or just need some advice, reach out to your area reps or any of the Nebraska Museums Association people. And I'm sure our presenters, they all seem to indicate that if you have more questions or want some advice, they're willing to be contacted. So that information will be on our website as well, and you can reach out to them if a question, think of a question later on tonight or tomorrow or later this week or month. So again, thank you for attending our 2021 virtual conference, and we'll see you in 2022.